Good afternoon to you all. Happy Friday, you lovely people. How are you doing? Lovely to see you. A few people joining now. How are we doing this week? How are we doing this Friday? End of another week. Can you believe it's October already? I just have to say it's a completely miserable day here. I went out earlier on and it was just awful. One of those days where there's kind of no point in having an umbrella because it's so windy, but I just got absolutely soaked anyway. So I really hope that it is much nicer wherever in the world you're watching from. I do hope it's much nicer wherever you are than here. We are absolutely definitely into into winter here now in London. Oh my goodness, what a dreary and cold week. I've been wearing a jacket and a hat during my morning runs. Can you believe that? So not quite sure where where autumn went. We've kind of gone straight into winter, but I do hope that it is much nicer wherever you are. Thank you for joining. Nice to see you. It's getting really dark as well in those mornings. The year is racing on, and I don't want to depress you, but the clocks go back in 4 weeks' time. The clocks go back. So yeah, from my perspective, that's kind of the end of the world as we know it for a few days when that happens. Anyway, on a brighter note, how are we doing this week? How's your family? How's your business? How's your team? How are you doing? How are you feeling now? We're into October. What have you been working on this week? How have you been? Last week I launched my people management training. It's a series of 6 workshops for new managers or those in need of a bit of a refresher, and we'll be starting next week with the very first workshop on Wednesday, and the take up has actually been really brilliant. There's just one spot left, so if you or anyone you know would like to grab that last place, then do let me know today, because as I say, we're starting next week, so wrapping up all the enrollments and everything today, so that's very exciting. So do tell me what you've been working on this week. So last Friday we were talking about how to avoid failure in business. Remember, 20% of all businesses fail in that first year and 50% in the first 5 years, and I was talking about how to avoid being part of those statistics. And the way that we do that is by focusing on what's really important in our businesses. And particularly at the moment in the current climate, I don't need to tell you how topsy-turvy everything is and how much uncertainty and change there is. And it's even more critical than usual to plan in that time for those things that are important but not urgent. And to be honest, I think this is so important. I would say that it's most likely to be the one thing that makes a difference between your business succeeding or failing. Just planning in that time to really focus on those important decisions and those important topics. If you haven't watched last week's live, then you can still access it in the group. All of the lives stay in the group for you to access whenever you need them. I also spoke last week about our relationship with failure and how we're conditioned from a very young age to see everything as this kind of pass-fail scenario. But business isn't really like that. It's very much a series, if you like, of successes and failures. And to be successful in business, you really need to get comfortable with both. You need to get comfortable with the ups as well as the downs, the highs and the lows. And that leads me actually really nicely into today's topic, which is all about testing and experimentation in the business. And business is actually all about testing, or it should be. We're testing our proposition, we're testing our message, we're testing our business model. And we're testing, what does our market really want from us, and how can we really know what our market wants from us? And this is actually really important throughout your business journey, but never more so than right at the start of the business journey. And I've spoken before about how many budding entrepreneurs get caught up with kind of ideas and how to protect, how do I protect my idea? I've had this great idea, how do I protect that? And you know what I always say is many Ideas can be magical, don't get me wrong, of course they can, but the real magic is in implementing, is in the implementation. It's actually easy to have an idea, and I don't want to sound disrespectful about those ideas, because of course when you have a great idea you get really, really excited, but protecting an idea is very hard, it is very expensive, and it doesn't really mean anything, because actually the way that you make a successful business is by implementing and by making that hard for other people to copy. You make a success by getting out there, getting your product and service out there, by building your brand. Sitting there trying to protect an idea, I don't think is a really great strategy. And I've also, that's one mistake, if you like, that I see people making. And I've also seen many people, myself included, I have to say, spend really precious money and a lot of time developing something before knowing whether or not it's really going to work, whether there's really a market for it. And I've definitely made that mistake in the past, and I see lots of people making that mistake. Testing is actually a crucial element in our success, but we often skip it because we're in a hurry to get to market. We're in a hurry to get something out there, and so we don't research and we don't plan and we don't really identify who our target market is, and that means that we don't get any feedback. We don't refine our idea to really meet our clients' needs. So it might feel great in our heads, but actually we don't road test it before putting it out there. And I know that in my case, I launched things in the early days that didn't work, and then my natural instinct was always to just kind of discard them, and I always wanted to move on. But if something fails, how do you know exactly what has failed? And that's my question for you today. How do you really know when something fails, what it is that has actually failed? And what I've learned over the years, and what I want to share with you today, is that test, measure, refine is a much, much better approach, rather than throwing the baby out with the bathwater, which was definitely my tendency when I first started out. So as an example, and I can see, Tom, that you're watching, good afternoon, you'll know what I'm talking about here. An example, if you put out a Facebook ad and it doesn't work, how do you know what hasn't worked? Is it the image? Is it the headline? Is it the words? Is it the targeting? Is it the landing page? Is it the offer? How do you know? The only way that you can actually know what is working and what isn't working is to test, measure, and refine every single parameter. I put out a product once that got no traction at all, nothing, no take up, nobody interested. And I put the same thing out a couple of months later and people were falling over themselves to join. And what that taught me is that timing is yet another variable. And so let's test your idea before you spend the time and the money developing it. Not to mention the website, the logo, the business cards, and all those other things that I see people spending time and money on rather than testing their idea. So today I want to share with you my 7 steps for testing your business idea. And in my Idea to Investor Ready bootcamp that I've mentioned to you, which is kicking off in January, and I'm so excited to share more details of that with you over the next few weeks. We're going to go through these 7 steps in a lot of detail, as you can imagine. But today I want to share with you the highlights and see what you think about them. So step 1 in my 7 steps of testing, if you like, is to test your idea on yourself. Now, what do I mean by that? Because that sounds a bit weird, right? Testing it on yourself. The first person that you really need to sell your idea to is yourself. If you're not convinced, if you wouldn't buy it, then you are going to struggle to sell it, and you're going to struggle to convince other people. You have to believe in what you're selling. And specifically, you have to believe in the outcome that you are delivering to your client. If you don't believe that it will deliver that outcome, then you won't be able to sell it. Don't forget that people buy solutions. They don't buy products and services. What they're buying from you is a solution. They don't care about the hammer, they don't care about the nail, they don't even care about the hole. What they want is the picture on the wall. Now, you might not be your own target client, so for your new product or service, but you still need to be convinced. You still need to convince yourself first, and that's why that's the first step. So live with your idea for a few weeks. Are you still feeling it? Do you still feel convinced? So I've seen people have an idea in the middle of the night and kind of run off and launch it the next day, and that's great in a way from a getting things done perspective, and I'm all for that, but just live with it maybe for a few days. If you don't want to do it for a few weeks, just live with it for a little while and see how it feels. Are you still feeling enthused? I've said to you before, building a business is hard. Launching a new product and service is hard. So we've got to really love it. We've got to really get it. We've got to really feel enthused about it. Okay, so now we've convinced ourselves. Now the next step is to get some feedback from people that you trust. And people that you trust will give you honest and constructive feedback. And that's really important. There's no point in asking someone that you know is going to be nice. And especially if you are not your target market, then you need to find somebody that you trust who is your target market and who will tell you what they really think. That's super important. So once we've convinced ourselves and we've got some kind of honest and constructive feedback from those people that we trust around us, then we need to create what's called an MVP. And this is a Silicon Valley phrase. And what it means is a minimum viable product. Minimum, so that's the least amount of time and money and effort that you can spend getting a viable product or service out there. So something that works, but without all the bells and whistles. The key is to have something to test. That's what we're trying to do here. So that's our step 3. Step 4 is then once you've found your MVP, your prototype, your test service, not once you've found it, once you've created it, I should say. Once you've created something that you can test, now you need to get it out there and talk to some potential clients. But what you want now in this step 4 is you want to try and find those people who will be a bit skeptical, a bit critical, maybe people that have complained before, or maybe people that you know maybe are a bit glass half empty, or people that will actually pick your idea apart a little bit. And the reason I'm saying that is you really want to find the negatives at this early stage, before you spend this money and time. You really want to find the holes that you can't see because you're not objective about your own idea. So don't go to people that are going to be nice to you. There's really no point. If you want an ego boost, you can do that first. But this is really about finding those picky, pedantic people who will really tell you what you think. And I think you know who I mean. Those kinds of people that will pick it apart for you and give you some really great feedback. Now, I'm not going to try and sugarcoat this step, because for some of you, I know that this is going to be the hardest part, and I've really had to learn how to do this. I have to confess that I don't find this very easy. Asking people what they think can be really difficult, especially if you're offering a service like I am, and therefore the product is kind of you, and so you feel really quite emotionally attached to it, if you like. And you need to try and find some distance and make some different distance between yourself and your product or service. And it's not by accident that resilience is really at the heart of my real model and is the first thing that I work on with all of my clients for exactly this reason. It really is important to view feedback as part of the learning process. And what I find helps is to find out, rather than just saying, what do you think of this idea or this service or this product, is what you're really trying to find out is whether or not they identify with the problem that you are trying to solve. So is it a major obstacle for them, or is it just a bit of an annoyance? Does it impact all of the people you're talking to, or just some of them? You need to speak to a really good number of people here to get a real feel for what your market is telling you. So the upside, of course, of this step is that it can kill an idea really early on, and that's why it can be quite difficult, but it's good. You want to kill the ideas that are not going to really fly. And it's because it saves you potentially months and months of development, and as well as that money that you're going to need to invest potentially in trying to make it work. So that it's a good thing to kill things off early if that's the right thing to do, but it also will help you see really early on if you've really hit on something. Like if you've really, if you're really onto something, if you've really kind of hit a nerve or struck a chord with people, you'll hear that because people will jump on it, particularly if you know they're critical, skeptical people. If you've discovered a real solution to a problem that people are prepared to pay money to solve, then you know you're onto something, and you can have that confidence to move forward to the next step. So just having a look at some of your comments. Oh, there are a lot of comments there. Graham said, I missed step 2, sorry. So yeah, Paula's answering that. Feedback from people you trust. Who are your target market? Not necessarily. I would say step 2 is getting feedback from people around you that you trust will give you an honest opinion. It's difficult to get feedback from your target market without some kind of minimal viable product, without some kind of MVP, your sort of test service or your kind of prototype. Then you take it to your market. So first I would speak to people that you trust will give you an honest view, just as at the idea stage. Then create your minimal viable product, and then get it out to that target market, and get it out to lots of them, and get it out to those people that you find difficult, maybe that you've had a tough time with before. If you can get their honest feedback, wow, that can be really powerful. And as I say, it helps kill ideas off, but it also helps when you've really struck a chord with somebody. So then, of course, Shira's asking, what does MVP mean? So that's my step 3, and that's a Silicon Valley term, and that means minimum viable product. So the minimum effort, the minimum time, the minimum amount of money that you can put in to get something that's viable. So something that you can test, minus all the bells and whistles, but something that you can go out to the market and say, what do you think about this? Okay, so now we get on, so now we've done our 4 steps, and now we're going to go on to step 5, which of course is tweaking our product. And of course that's the real benefit of all that feedback, is that you get to tweak your product or your service. We can now turn it from an idea into something that has been rounded and molded by our market, by our potential customers. It makes it more suitable, if you like, to the real world. And the fact that we have run it past our harshest critics means that it's robust and it's got a bit of resilience built in, which is what we want here. Then once we've tweaked it and we're happy with it, and that might be a bit of an iterative process, then we want to go on to step 6. So step 6 then is the step that people often do right at the beginning, which is a website. Now, I am not talking about anything flashy or expensive. I am not talking about anything complicated. I am talking about a one-page website. We create a very, very simple one-page website, and we gauge interest through social media channels. So we go out to our network, we encourage people to visit, we encourage people to register, and we can then start to look at that data. How many people click? How many people register? Maybe we even send some paid traffic to that website. This is what we've done with our Idea to Investor Bootcamp. So if you want to check out an example of what I mean by a really simple one-page website, you can go to zventures.tech and you have a look. Really simple website. Took one of my guys, like an hour or 2 to put it up there. Really, really simple. And it's a simple one-page website. It's got some good SEO. We're driving some traffic to it, organic and paid, and it's attracting a lot of interest. So a lot of people are registering, a lot of people are getting in contact. So we know that we have something that people want to know more about, and now we can feel confident to move on to the next step, which in our case is going to be a launch event. So Graham is asking, would you do a website or a funnel? Haha, great question. So what I am learning, and Adam, who we both know, would probably have already told us this, is for me, they're very interchangeable now. So I've got a website, lisazevi.com, but all of my product offerings are funnels. So if you look at zventures.tech, it's a funnel. It's a very, very simple funnel. It's a one-page website. You register your details to hear more about the launch event, and then it's got a thank you page behind it. So I think for these kinds of examples, for when we're talking about launching, if you like, and testing, I think funnels are the way forward. So happy to answer more questions on that. I'm a bit of a funnel queen now. I love a good funnel. So I, in answer to your question, it looks like a simple one-page website, but in actual fact, it's a funnel, and it's the easiest way to capture people's data in my experience. Now, step 6, which is that very simple website, or website or funnel page, landing page, if you prefer. I talked about driving traffic, I talked about social media channels, and that leads me on to step 7, which is my final step, which is really having a testing plan. So we've tested our product, we've gathered feedback from critics, we've refined our product and service, and now we're kind of gauging broader interest. And so we need a proper testing plan. And by that I mean, think about all the different ways that you can market your product or service, both organic and paid. So what channels can you use? What activities could you do? What contacts have you got in your network? What partnerships could you leverage? It's a question of listing down all of those different things and get as many, I would recommend get 100 if you can, all the different things that you could do, you could ask other people to do. How can you generate interest effectively? How can you drive traffic to that page? The goal here is to test and to measure. So in order to measure, we need data, and in order to be sure about anything, we need data. So which channels work best? So are we getting more interest on Facebook? Are we getting more interest on Instagram? Are we getting more interest on LinkedIn? What kind of messaging, what messages are landing for people? So in the case of our Z Ventures, is it that people want to leave their job because they've got a great business idea? Is it that people don't know how to raise money? Is it that people don't know how to refine their idea? What messages so we've put out a number of different messages to see what is landing with people, what kind of works. What methods of communication? So are people responding more to words or video? I know the conventional wisdom is that video is always better. That's not true. It depends on your market. It depends on who you're talking to. Some people don't respond well to video. Some people prefer to be able to read a short, snappy headlines and bullet points, for example. Which kind of images, when I'm running Facebook ads, for example, I'm always running multiple images. Which images are landing? And it's really interesting to see what people respond to, what text, what words, what is my market responding to? We think that we know, the bottom line about all of this is we think that we know our clients, and I'm sure that all of you know your clients well, or at least think you do, and I think I know my clients well. But we must be data-driven about this. I can't tell you the number of times where I have been surprised about an image that has worked better than another, or a headline that has worked, or a particular channel, a particular approach, a particular kind of post. It's really, really interesting. And you just don't know until you collect the data. This is the only way to do this, to properly test. Otherwise, you're just kind of trying stuff out, which is fine, but that's not really testing. So to quote Tom Cruise in one of my favourite movies, A Few Good Men, it doesn't matter what I believe, it only matters what I can prove. I love that film. Okay, so my 7 steps of testing, just to recap then. So first of all, test it on yourself. If you're not convinced, move on. The next one is to get some feedback from your network, just some feedback around the idea, some honest and constructive feedback. Then you create your minimum viable product, your MVP. Minimum amount of time, resources and effort to get something out there. Not bells and whistles, not perfect, and I'm saying that to myself as much as to all of you, does not have to be perfect. Minimum viable product. We're getting that out there, and then we are talking to our potential customers, we are talking to our market, and we're trying to find those really harsh critics, those people that are going to rip it apart for us. Then we're tweaking it, then we're building that one-page website, funnel, landing page, whatever you want to call it. And we are having a really robust testing plan. So we are testing multiple channels, we are testing multiple activities, and we are collecting as much data as we can so that we can see what works. All on a small budget, and we're moving fast and we're being agile about this. So as you've probably guessed throughout this live today, I have made a lot, probably all of the mistakes, or certainly most of the mistakes that we've spoken about today. I've wasted a lot of time and a lot of money, and I really have learnt the hard way. Now I follow these steps for any new product that I'm thinking of launching, and I really do urge you to do the same, unless you want to repeat all of the mistakes that I've made them for you. You don't need to make them. Follow these steps. Trust me, they work. So how about you? Do you follow these kind of steps, or what kind of process do you follow when you are launching a new product or service, or even when you started your business? What was the process that you went through? Think back and see how many of those 7 steps maybe you followed. See what maybe you missed out and what you could do better next time. I do want to talk a little bit about mindset here. We need to have a creative mindset when we're testing. We're experimenting, we're learning, but you do need some structure and you do need to be organised. You need to kind of think of yourself a little bit as a scientist, let's say. It's not about success or failure. It is all about gathering data. If we are afraid to fail, then we won't put ourselves in situations where that might happen. We just simply won't do that. But then we never learn, and we don't pursue new ideas, or we waste time and money kind of launching things that could have worked, but we launch them, we don't test them properly, and then we conclude, oh, that doesn't work. And I know I did a lot of that in the early days, like, oh, I've obviously got that wrong. I've obviously, misread my market, or, I need to move on. And I wasted quite a lot of time in the beginning doing that, rather than following a more kind of organised, process-driven approach, if you like, and really properly testing and gathering data. Don't rely on what you think you know. I'm not trying to say you don't know your clients, but what I'm trying to say is what you know about your clients is all muddled up in your head with your assumptions, with your own self-talk, with how you're feeling that day, with all kinds of other stuff in there that is not data-driven. We are creatures of emotion, after all of us. And so that's just a little bit of a warning that a data-driven approach is always much, much better. So having that right mindset and reminding yourself that you're testing, we're testing here. And it makes you then more accepting of mistakes and failures. If you put yourself in that mindset and you remind yourself, we're testing here, it's okay, we're just testing, You're much more likely also to develop really deeply valuable products and services for your clients if you embrace this more creative way of thinking, rather than it's got to be perfect before I put anything out there. You need to start seeing success and failure as kind of 2 sides of what we're trying to achieve here. We need to almost start seeing failure as success, if you like. We need both of these things. In this ever-changing world that we're living in right now, but I mean probably forever, right? I mean, when do we not have an ever-changing world? Knowledge is really powerful. Knowledge about our market, knowledge about our customers, and data really allows us to make those right decisions in our business that I was talking about right at the beginning. And so in order to make those good decisions, we really do need data. And testing isn't actually only important when you're starting out in business or you're launching a new product or service. It's actually really important to keep testing as your business grows. Keep testing what your market's telling you and what your customers are telling you. So I've got 5 quick rules of testing that I'd love to share with you. So the first one is all about individuals. We tend to think about our market as a sort of a kind of a homogenous blob. And we forget sometimes that we're actually talking about lots and lots of different individuals. And so rather than guessing how our customers will react to a change, it's much better to test it on a small sample and see what they do, because what we're trying to understand here is the actions that they take. Yeah, so words are great, but actions are really golden. Number 2, golden rules of testing. Keep it simple. I mean, that's just one of my rules, full stop. Keep it simple. But particularly when we're testing, I think many of us have a tendency to overcomplicate things. If I'm geeking out on a great spreadsheet, the sort of temptation to overcomplicate things can be quite overwhelming. But we have to keep things simple when we're testing. Use existing resources, use existing systems. Like, don't create something big and new and complicated and shiny. We're testing here, yeah. And we're trying to be nimble and agile. So use what you already have and think about how you can use that to keep things simple when you're testing. The next thing is, and I fell really, really foul of this also not very long ago, one thing at a time when we're testing, one thing at a time. You've really got to be disciplined about this, and again, I have learned the hard way, and you can only change one thing at a time. So this is absolutely my downfall, and I still have to remind myself of this. I always want to tweak multiple things, but if you do that, then you don't know what's worked. You don't know if you change to use the advert example again, if you change the headline and the image and it starts working, you don't know which one your audience is responding to. So whenever you're testing, one thing at a time, change one thing at a time. So figure out how many parameters you've got and then change one thing at a time. I'm not going to pretend that's easy, but we've got to do it. Number 4 then is to analyse the data that you get back. You need to be looking for patterns, and don't make assumptions, because you could conclude from your homogeneous blob that something is not working, but then if you look deeper in, you might see that there are differences between different ages, different genders, different location, different occupation. So then you need to start slicing and dicing your data and analysing it to see what it's actually telling you. Don't assume beforehand what it's going to tell you or what conclusions you might be able to draw. You've got to get the data, and then you've got to do the analysis. And my 5th and final golden rule is really about measuring things that matter. I've spoken before about having too much data can actually be as bad as not having any data or not having enough data. Really think about what the important metrics are for you and for your business and for your product and services. Why are you measuring those things? And really crucially, what question is it that you're trying to answer? What's the question that you are seeking to gather data on, or that you're seeking to get an answer about? That's really, really important when you're thinking about what you're measuring. Resist the temptation to measure everything or not to measure enough. You've really got to get that balance and make sure you're measuring the things that matter. So they are my 5 golden rules of testing. And generally they are my thoughts on testing in business. I'm really interested to hear how you use testing and experimentation in your business and what the results have been. Do you do it in an organised, systemised way that I've tried to give you today, or is it a bit more haphazard? What have you learned through testing? I'd really love to hear your thoughts. I'm going to close up today's live with 2 quotes about testing and experimentation. So the first is from an aerospace engineer and entrepreneur whose name is Bert Rutan, I think I've pronounced that correctly. And what Bert has to say on the subject is, testing leads to failure and failure leads to understanding. And this is what I was trying to say earlier on about, we really need to start seeing failure as success as long as we're learning from it. And I say in my book about learning from mistakes, and I say to my clients, mistakes are great as long as you don't make the same one twice. Yeah, so mistakes are golden, just don't repeat them. And my second quote is from Warren Buffett, who is of course the legendary investor. And what he has to say on this subject is, never test the depth of the river with both of your feet. How genius is that? And I think what he's trying to say is, don't put all your eggs in one basket, but I just love that. Don't test the depth of the river with both of your feet. Did you ever do that as a child? Kind of jump in somewhere that was too deep and realise that the water pressure was a little bit too strong? Maybe it was just me. So let me know your thoughts and questions on this or any other topic relating to how to grow a business that works for you. What area of business would you like me to speak about next? What would be helpful for you? If you haven't already got a free copy of my book, The Real Entrepreneur, then you can go to therealentrepreneur.book.com. If you prefer an Audible version, that is out also, although it's not free yet. I'm working on that. I do hope that you have a really lovely weekend, whatever you're doing and whoever you're doing it with. I do really wish you a happy and a peaceful time. And as always, if you want to talk, then you do know where I am. Please remember to be where you are in the journey. You don't need to know it all, and you certainly don't have to do it all. So please take care, stay safe, and keep in touch. Bye for now.